Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again. I am Kaylee Batesman, the content director at SheCanCode, and today we are asking, what does a content design director at Bumble do all day? The role of content design director in the tech industry is crucial in shaping the way users interact with digital products, services, and platforms. And luckily, I'm joined by the fabulous Candi Williams, content design director at Bumble today, who is going to tell us all about her role at the dating app, share her advice for those wanting to work in design, and reveal what life is like working at Bumble. Welcome, Candi. Lovely to have you on here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for agreeing to come on and have a chat. You probably have one of the busiest days ever, so thank you so much. Can we kick off with a little bit of background about yourself to set the scene, please?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. So I guess my kind of entry into the tech industry may not have been a traditional one, if there is such a thing. So my background in kind of where I studied was in linguistics, and specifically in the kind of realm of social linguistics and psycholinguistics, which is a fancy way for talking about the way that language impacts how people think, how they act, how they feel, how they make decisions, and how they make sense of the world. And after that, I went down again a non-traditional route of doing what I thought every graduate did back then, which was get an office job. And I remember one day I was filing, back in the days where you file paper, old school, I know. Um, and I just realized that I was really missing the creativity, the innovation side of things, and all of the things that I had kind of loved about my degree. I've always been really passionate about learning, and I was just missing using kind of that side of my brain. So at that point, I took an internship at a fintech before they were cool. Back in the days of kind of SEO, it was very much a startup back then. And I was working in the kind of early stages of SEO, and I really became really fascinated with not the kind of more negative sides and keyword stuffing, such like, but actually like how we can really use that to really understand how people navigate the internet, the really important role that language plays there as well, because I think often we think about, the behind the scenes, but really with that front end, people are typing in things because they have a clear need or ask. So I really became fascinated with that and how I could create content. Back then it was a lot of blogs and articles, but how I could create content based on what people need, what was going to help them get to what they needed to do quickly, and what was going to solve real problems in their life at the time. And it's kind of been upwards for many iterations and tools since then.
Amazing. And it's so interesting that you say you went into linguistics, and as you said, the language that we use and the decisions that people make based on that, and now obviously working at Bumble, that's so interesting that overlapping of those skills there. We have this conversation regularly on this podcast that everybody thinks that you have to be very techie to go into tech, and actually your crossover skills were linguistics, and just as you said, you were doing lots of things that were solving problems and helping people make decisions, and they're not necessarily what people think the tech industry would be. They always think you have to have that computer science degree, but you didn't go down a traditional route like many other ladies that I have on the podcast. Do you have a team like that as well? Do you have a mixture of colleagues that have kind of come from a traditional background and non-traditional? What is there kind of a mix there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, content design is a newer term for roles that have been around for some time. So there's, definitely not such a kind of traditional background for a content designer. But for me, I completely agree with what you just said there. And when I really kind of strip it all back, tools and methodologies kind of come and go, but my experience has been that people are always at the heart of it, right? And that's been the case if I've worked in B2C or B2B. Like, at the end of the experience we're creating is something that people want, need to be able to understand. So I think that backgrounds, I have a team with a real myriad of backgrounds, but I think what they all share is a deep empathy for people, understanding people, and creating experiences that people find really useful. And I think that that goes both ways, right? Because if you can do it on the user side, it's also really applicable and important on the business side, because businesses are also made up of people, of many different skill sets. So I think like that is what I would say is really like the key skill, if we had one that kind of brings content designers together.
Yeah, is that kind of what first sparked your interest into going into tech, or were there other things, like there are lots of things that are, we say on here, the best kept secrets of the tech industry, like the salaries are good, you can have flexible working, and there's lots of opportunity to move around. What kind of sparked your interest about going into tech?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think for me, I have always been like, I would describe myself as a lifelong learner. Like I've always been like passionately curious and interested. So I think tech is really good for that, because as we know, it's always changing. Like there's always a new tool, always a new thing to learn. So I think like that has really sparked my interest and kept me really engaged in the tech industry. And I think the other thing that I really enjoy is I really enjoy unpacking complexity and kind of unpicking it and looking at how we can make it clearer. So I think in my role, in various different places that I've worked, whether it's in finance or it's in e-commerce or obviously in the dating space, there is so much, complexity and things to get your head around, so you can really explain those and help people to understand those in the simplest, easiest way for them. So I think that that's another thing that has also really attracted me, is being able to get my teeth into some things that, on first glance, you might be like, whoa, okay, this is going to be a tough nut to crack, for want of a better idiom. But then, that beautiful feeling when you can kind of really help to unravel and unpick it and add some simplicity.
Mm. It takes quite a mindset, doesn't it, to want to work in the tech industry, and as you said, with that constant learning, as well, is one of those main things that I've had lots of ladies on here that have said something similar, that you have to stay ahead of the curve working in tech, and that takes a certain person to want to continually learning, to continually learn. It's not, I've just graduated and I can stop, and that's kind of it. If you want to keep up with the good jobs, you have to keep learning, and that's can be quite a commitment. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how did you land your current role, and was it planned?
Yeah, really good question. No, I wouldn't say it was planned, but I was working in a not dissimilar role. So I was working as a manager in another content design team, actually in fintech too. So there's a theme there. And I've been on quite a journey with that role. So I started it around the time that content design was becoming popular. It was pretty new. Sarah Winter's kind of first book about content design was out. So it was kind of a new, exciting thing. And I had started as part of a team of 2 and helped to grow that team to 25 people. And it was a really amazing experience where it had kind of gone from content designers, not necessarily being included or people not knowing what we did, to, the business not being able to get enough content designers and really seeing the value that they had, and then being involved in kind of every area, whether it's web transformations, new product propositions, etc. So that was really exciting. And at the time, my role had moved beyond just a kind of focus on the digital experience and the UX side to the wider content strategy and operations. So really looking holistically across the organization at measurement, how the content's working, how is content engineering coming together, how can we join up content with other communications teams more efficiently, how can we get some standards in place around things like accessibility, some of those big important issues. And I got to a point where I was loving what I was doing, but I think the maturity, I'd seen the team go on a journey, and the Bumble job came around just at the right time, really, where I was kind of thinking, you know, absolutely, this sounds interesting, like a new challenge. Yeah, it was one of those things. I'm not going to say fate, but it was just like the timing kind of aligned pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. And that's nice that you kind of worked your way through lots of different places, and then kind of, you know, that's always nice when things just turn up out the blue and you think that company was definitely had my name written on it at that moment in time. We are all dying to know, what is life like working at Bumble, because it does sound and look like a lot of fun. So what is your day like? What is the average day like for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, isn't it? I don't think that I've had an average day since about 2009. Um, uh, but I think, you know, and I reflect on this a lot, I think one of the strongest skills in a leadership role is adaptability. And what changes quite a lot as a leader is, I think, like, gone are the days where you know, your progress might be as linear as it once was. And I don't mean that as kind of upward progress. I mean, like, when you're an IC, you will be working on a specific project, it will have an end goal, etc. When you're a leader, like, you're managing people, not just product experiences, and not just processes. And I think inherently people are wonderful, but there can be changes and there can be unpredictability in your week. So I think, yeah, average day. Average days don't really happen, but I think one of the best things I love about Bumble, and it might sound cheesy or cliche, but the relationships that you're able to build. And one of my strengths, hopefully, and one thing that I really enjoy doing is being able to kind of connect the dots and bring people together. And, you know, that might be across completely different functions. And at Bumble, I guess on an average week, I could be working with anyone from my closest peers in product design, product management, engineering, right through to working with like some of the smartest minds in legal, policy, safety, and amazing marketing and brand teams. And I think, like, that is one of the things I just love the most about Bumble, because while an average week always looks different, like, I'm always getting to work with such a, like, amazing range of skills, talents, expertise, which I find really, really heartening and wonderful to get to learn from so many awesome people.
Did you think it was going to be like that? Again, that's another stereotype of going into the tech industry. You work quite siloed, and you would just you know, put your headphones on and code, and that's kind of it in the tech industry. But you there just said you work across all different types of teams, and you have to be able to communicate with lots of, you know, different employees and make those relationships. And is that, did you kind of know that that was going to happen, or did you have some kind of other thought about what it might be like working in tech?
Yeah, great question. I think at Bumble specifically, I'm not going to say it's like Narnia, but I think on the surface, it's a dating app, which has a wonderful reputation. I think that when you get through, it really opens your eyes to the amount of important components that go into helping people make connections, right? And I think one of the things that will always stand out to me, and I'll be very humbled by, is the work that goes into safety and the work our amazing member safety and safety policy teams do, not just on a kind of day-to-day basis, but actually, like, lobbying, changing, you know, working to change policies and improve things for women, and many, many other people that are making connections all over. So I think that breadth, you know, I probably wasn't aware of, and just the incredible level of work that we do. So not just dating, but also helping people make connections with friendships. And when loneliness is so rife, you know, that's such an important perspective. And there's just so much to it. We've been doing a big piece of work around accessibility, and I have visual impairments. I think things like that are, like, really, really close to my heart. It feels like, you know, it's much, much broader than what some might perceive to just be a dating app. And I think, you know, many of those components are what makes me excited to kind of get out of bed in the morning, as they say.
Yes, definitely. And that's the thing about tech, isn't it? If you find yourself at the right company and you find you're not just doing a tech job, you're actually making an impact. A little bit about content design. What qualifications have you found most useful to hold to be working in content design? Because yourself, you came in from a non-traditional background, but actually you have quite a few qualifications under your belt that sound like they also apply to content design. Is there anything that has really helped you along the way?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because I will never forget when I was in a lecture and they basically said that with the degree that we had, so English language and linguistics, that your two options were really you could go and be a journalist or you could go be a teacher. And I remember sitting in on the teaching talk and they said, you know, if you're 99% sure that you want to be a teacher, you know, you should leave now because you need to be 100% sure. And I remember leaving university, and I'm sure many can relate to this, feeling pretty confused around what I wanted to do, not knowing what the path was, and tech wasn't really up there at the time of something that I thought that I would go into at all. I think it's great that it's come full circle, but it definitely wasn't a linear path with my degree. And I think I see that in, you know, many, many people's paths. And a controversial potentially opinion for me, but I don't necessarily believe that qualifications are the most important parameter for role success, especially for a role like content design. And I've seen so many people that, you know, may have no official degree, but just have like amazing skills, like people that have been technical writers or they've worked in customer support and they've ended up being the person that writes the emails, you know, like
Yeah.
just like there's so many great skills and backgrounds that people come from that for me, while there are kind of affinities between my linguistic side and what I do now, I think that things like really, you know, people's inquisitive nature, the empathy that we spoke about, being able to problem solve and pragmatism are just so important. Although those things, you know, might not be in the textbooks, I think that they kind of stand out probably above some of the more traditional routes into tech careers. And I kind of get asked a lot about things like boot camps and courses, and I think there's some great ones out there for content design now, which is good, but a lot of it for me is really those skills that, you know, you might not learn or pick up in the traditional way or might be transferable, but from jobs that, you know, very much outside of a tech pathway, so to speak.
Yeah, and I love that you just picked up on that there, transferable skills. Because it is, people seem to think, as we said before, if you don't have that computer science degree, you can't go into tech. And it's bizarre because, you know, all those transferable skills that you use when you are in tech, you almost don't realize, you know, all those jobs before you went into the tech industry are so helpful to have gotten you to that part. And I've spoken to ladies on we do live webinars as well, and I had a lady on there and she was saying, you know, it's strange that to think that I'm quite junior in tech, but I've been in work for the last 15 years. But all of those transferable skills that she took over to working in technology really helped her. So she didn't have to remain that junior. But she said it was strange for me thinking, actually, I'm far more experienced than a lot of my team. But I've just, you know, crossed over from somewhere else. And like yourself, you took a lot of those skills with you. So I'm assuming you can move quite quickly now through the world of tech because you have lots of work experience behind you. Can I ask you a little bit about your career and what are you most proud of in your career so far?
What am I most proud of? I'm proud of a lot of things. I think for me, one thing that really does make me feel proud is when I look at some of the people who I might have supported in their careers, or people that I've hired who know whether we still work together, whether they've gone on to other things, but being able to see their careers kind of grow and flourish. And content design hasn't always had, defined career paths or opportunities in the way that, some of the more mature functions might have. So that always brings me great joy. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is also a huge one to me. So I've been able to do mentoring in places like Nigeria, and support many organizations and kind of equity scholarships and things like that to really help people with opportunities. And that is just really critically important to me. And I do think, if I'm honest, from when I started in tech to where we are now, I do think that we're making progress on the DEI front. I don't think we're ever in a perfect place, but it makes me feel extremely proud to see, for instance, more Black people working in content design, or greater representation in Africa, in Asia, in many places where there weren't content design teams before. And I think more organizations doing more to support that in the right way is really important to me, and something I feel proud to have played, albeit perhaps a small part in.
Yeah, amazing. It's always amazing when people just remember to not pull up the ladder behind them, I suppose is the thing. And just thinking, just sometimes remembering as well that it's not always easy to get into a particular area, or do what you move into the space that you might want to next. And mentoring is so valuable for other people. I'm assuming when they go on to become leaders as well, you'll be able to think, I played a part in that, is so valuable. Talking of developing careers, how does Bumble continue to develop your own career?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it does it in a number of ways. And, one of the things that I've loved about Bumble since I've joined, and that attracted me to join, is how we try to treat things like learning and development. So currently, and it's always been the case since I've been here, that people get a learning budget which is defined, and what's defined is the kind of budget, but what isn't defined is how you spend that. So it's a case of you being able to work with your manager, you being able to identify skills that you want to work on, and really tailoring a pathway around that. And so for me, that's been really valuable, because I think some places it can just be really hard to get sign off to do anything, whether it's a conference, whether it's a course. But I think that what helps with this is you can really, drive some of your development and put tangible actions in place. So I have used it for a wide range of things, from coaching sessions to content design specific sessions, to sessions on skills for leading through the pandemic and all of the many things that we couldn't have planned. So a real mix of the more kind of technical side of things, but also really refining on the people skills side of things, which has been really wonderful. So I've really enjoyed that. And I think it's critical as a leader, because it becomes harder sometimes to step back and actually think about, what do I want to learn? So for me, it's always a checkpoint. Okay, like, what do I really want to focus in on? What are my areas where I want to hone up and polish up on? And it's been brilliant, some of the things that I've been able to do with it and learn from it.
And that's really good to hear, because some companies, it's hard to get a learning budget, let alone what you're allowed to spend it on. And I love the fact that you said that it's not defined what you spend it on as well, because like you said, if you're at the start of your career, you might be thinking tech courses, and I'll do things to help my my own personal development and career. And then actually when you become a leader, that's very different, and you might want to, as you said, do some courses about, you know, being a good leader and everything that comes with that, and it will change. Whereas, you know, if a company's quite rigid on what you learn, how you use your learning budget, that's not really helping you grow as a person, is it? And let alone a leader.
Definitely. And I think it also accounts for different learning styles as well. Like I've learned a lot about my learning style, and that could be very different to, you know, other people's. And what it allows me to do as a leader is to really work with my team on their objectives, things that they're doing really well, but also areas they want to grow, and actually put tangible things in place. You know, here's things that we can work on together, here's things you might work on a project, but also there's some opportunities that are wider than that, because I think it's also really important for people sometimes to be able to step out of the day to day, and, you know, kind of hone up on specific areas.
Yes, yeah, that's great. And as well, I love it when companies do that, because they're also thinking that they might not say it, but they're also thinking, you know, I kind of want to help you progress personally, and within your career, even for when you go on to your next job, because all of those things help you, whatever your next role may be anyway, let alone helping you at your current company as well. And that's just really something that comes from really good companies that just understand that, you know, as you said, stepping out of that day to day can really help you progress within your career, and wherever you move on to next. Good companies really do recognize that. We are almost out of time. I could speak to you for another 2 hours on this subject, but we are almost out of time. So I've got one last question for you. What advice would you give yourself just starting out, and what advice would you give our listeners who might be considering a career in content design?
Great question. And I think some of the advice mirrors what we've just been discussing in terms of different learning styles, different ways of learning. I think the main advice that I would give myself if I was starting out is not to chase perfection or best practice. And I believe that when you start out in the UX kind of industry, it's really important to remember that you're delivering for customers, and not to just prove that you followed everything by the textbook per se. And naturally, when you're early career, you have this notion that you want to do things right. But one thing that I have learned is, like, arguably there are many, many shades of right, and it's often not as black and white as it might be perceived in articles or such like. And the other thing I'd tell myself is, you know, as content designers, we're often spread quite thinly, and it's really important to remember that even if you can't achieve all of the things you might like to on any given project, you can almost always make things that bit better for humans using the products or the tech. And that really, really matters, because I think, again, it's very easy for us working in tech to want to solve every problem. So you can often get fixated on things that really aren't out of your control. And I think by grounding yourselves in what you can achieve, you often find that you achieve much more than you think that you might. And for someone starting out, I'd say probably similar things. There is so much thought leadership out there, and a little bit of, I guess, like dogmatism in some ways, that it can be really easy for people to feel like they're not doing things right or achieving what they need to, or they're not where they need to be in their career. But I think if you look at my career, it's been pretty squiggly, and, you know, even if things aren't quite where they need to be now, or you're not where you need to be now, or where you feel like you need to be now, it's not a reflection of you, so to speak. And I think even if you are in those early stages, and, you know, you might want to be working on the big projects that you've heard about and you're not actually able to at this point, like, just remember, like, the progress that you are making, and reflect on that. And, you know, every day you're actually out there chipping away, making things better, easier for people to understand, more engaging, more accessible. And that's cool, right? Like, that really matters. Yeah. So just don't lose sight of the seemingly little things, because more often than not, like, they are the big things, and they do really matter.
Yes, I love that. It's such good advice for anybody wanting to go into content design and into tech as well. I think that's something that women in tech, or women in general, tend to do. At the start you said not chasing perfection, and I think that's what women do a lot. And I've heard it so many times when people say women don't apply for a job unless they hit sort of 9 out of 10 or the things that are required, whereas men tend to go for the job even if they only meet a few of the requirements. And you're right, it's that chasing perfection sometimes can really put us at a disadvantage, because you, as you said, you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture and what is important. I think that's such good advice, and I take it something that you wish someone had told you before you started out.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that, especially when you're starting out in a newer industry, right? Like, you cling to what guidance that you have in front of you, and that's really important. It's really useful. But every organization is different. Every project I've worked on is different. Every, every set of customers is diverse. So there's no perfect approach, and that's okay. And I think it's really being able to remember that you're there for a reason. You've been hired for your skills, and you bring so much to the table, even if you might feel that you're not following a perfect methodology per se.
Yeah, definitely. That is wonderful advice to end it on, because we are already out of time. It's absolutely flown by. So thank you so much for joining us today, Candi. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here for a chat.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Good, thank you. And to all our listeners, everyone, thank you so much as always for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.